Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Webinar Wednesday with Church Communications. My name is Abby and I'm joined here today by Scott. We're so excited to have him on with us. He's from Kindrid. So today we'll be talking about how to better engage and connect with people using digital tools. So obviously we know that things have changed so much in the last few years. Technology is changing every day. How do we keep up? That's the question. So Scott is going to share some of his insight with us, share some tools that will hopefully help us keep up in this new world of digital ministry. So Scott, first, before we dive in, we just want to hear a little bit about you, a little bit about Kindrid. So just give us some background.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. It's something that I'm personally really passionate about, and excited to kind of explore different ways to continue to engage people. But myself, I have a background in ministry. So I spent the last 15 years in full-time vocational ministry in all sorts of different contexts. So from mega churches to helping with church plants and kind of ever in between. And my roles have been kind of all over the place as well, whether it's overseeing communications, social media, design, website, all of that. Worship pastor, overseeing small groups. So I love ministry. I love the church. And then, I've stepped into this role here at Kindred as well, where I'm helping churches kind of better engage and equip people using different tools and different software as well. So excited to kind of explore some of this stuff, and hopefully serve some people in the meantime.
Very cool. So you've been in the trenches. This has been your life. You've been there before, where all of our church communicators and pastors out there listening or watching. You've been there, so that's awesome.
I've been there, and I was there through 2020 as well. Into 2021. So I even kind of know even what this last season probably has been like for a lot of folks. And so they have both my deep gratitude and also my desire to hopefully help and encourage some.
Well, that's awesome. I think that gives you you're very close to their hearts and you get their perspective. So I think that's awesome.
Yep.
So what are you seeing in the ministry world now when it comes to engaging and connecting with people? Just give us kind of like an overview of what that looks like right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to many, but, we are seeing people engage with the church in just a different way. So the mindset about church has changed, but also sort of the rhythms and the patterns that exist in people's lives have changed as well. So we're seeing people spread out. We're seeing people who, as 2020 and 2021 kind of have happened and we've walked through them, it's really altered and shifted things. So we see people spread out. We see ministry leaders, pastors, communication directors really asking the question, so who is a part of our church? We have this group of people that we know, but then we also have sort of this group that is online and that we sort of know and sort of engage with. And then we have some people who we haven't seen in a while. And so I think that what we're seeing is obviously times have changed, methods of communication have changed, and just the way that people think and engage with the church has changed. And so it has really kind of shifted the way then that we think about communications, engaging people, getting people connected, trying to reach out and engage with those people. So that's what we're seeing. I'm sure, a lot of people watching this have seen the same thing, whether you're in a rural context or suburban or urban or whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's changing a lot, and people are always looking for new ways to increase engagement. And like you said, who are we going after? Who are we trying to connect with? Who are we trying to build those relationships with? Is it the people on the other sides of the screen? Is it the people who are in our buildings? Some of our churches don't have buildings anymore, and it's all online. So it can be a little tricky. It can be a little overwhelming too, because it's like, before it was just one avenue, and now we're thinking about 6 different channels of connection.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing is I think we've often approached it as like this is the way that we communicate with everybody, because everybody kind of engages the same, right? They come through the front door, or they go on the website, they come through the front door, they're in the service, so on and so forth. And now it's like, sure, some are doing that, but others are watching a stream, or others are seeing some social media content or whatever it might be. And so, to take sort of this one size fits all approach and put it on everybody, I don't think it's quite as effective as saying, okay, how are people engaging? So then how do we tailor our communication and our outreach for the way that they're engaging with us? Because that matters. That's different. I mean, even the way we behave, whether it's with, if you shop at a store or if you sign up for something online, like people have different ways in which they want to be engaged and connected. And so seeking to figure out what works well for those streams and how do we do that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the first step, is to identify where are the people and then how do we reach them. So do you have maybe some best practices for church leaders that they could start to implement in order to improve that engagement once they've identified where it's, likely going to be the most effective for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of them is looking at those streams and figuring out, okay, how are people engaging with us? So maybe it's changed again. It's not just people walking in a front door, but it's that plus a stream plus whatever else it might be. So I think the first step is just put that all on the table or on the whiteboard or wherever it needs to go, and just recognize those, because again, sometimes those happen. And I get it. In 2020, that stuff had to happen fast. So maybe now's the time to step back and look at, so how is that happening, right? We have our website, we have social media, we have the stream, we have, people walking in our building. So lay those out. And I think from there, to really start to draw a strategy around, now, how do we engage somebody who comes and sits in our service for the first time? So from the moment they pull into that parking lot to they walk into the building to they sit down to whatever it is, like how are we connecting with them? And then even one of the things that we're starting to see be really, really effective is, how do you get proactive even in that communication? How do you engage somebody before they even walk into your building? And so that's where I think looking then at the different channels. So for instance, if somebody tunes into a stream, let's just say Facebook Live or a YouTube, stream, because I know that the majority are probably, somewhere on those platforms. Well, you have their information in some way. And so I think looking at then, how do you make a connection, whether it is a social media request, whether it's reaching out in that way? How do you figure out needs? Because that's the one thing that I will say is across the field, everybody has needs, whether they're watching your stream, sitting in your building, just visiting your website. There's some things in their life that they are, I think, needing either help with, encouragement with, whatever it might be. So how do you figure out those? And then how do you engage with those? So I know sometimes we talk kind of big picture, and so people are like, that sounds awesome. What does that mean?
Right.
What do we actually do? So for instance, I think looking at the tools that you use and see, do we have a way for somebody to easily submit a prayer request that then notifies us and maybe a team of people, both how to pray for them, but also how to connect with them to follow up with that. I'll tell you, my family and I recently just moved, and so we needed to find a new church, and so we started going to this church. It's actually just 5 minutes down the street, and I think it was the second week there, I ended up submitting a prayer request, part because, again, I have needs and some things to pray for, and because I also was a little curious, what's the process?
What's the process here? Yeah, what are they going to do?
Yeah, I've sort of obviously, given my background, so I always kind of have an eye out for that.
Of course, yeah.
So I submitted that. So we were sitting in the service. Announcements came up. Everybody's favorite time of the worship service, the announcements, and that was a little tongue in cheek, because as a worship pastor, it was always man, where do we put the announcements? But
yes, anyway. It's always a weird thing. Yeah.
So they put a QR code up on the screen, big enough for me to take out my phone. I scanned it with the camera, opened up a form, submitted a prayer request. It took all of 20 seconds, right, to do that, to type it, to send it. And then I think it was that Wednesday, I got an email from one of the staff members that just said, "Hey, Scott, so glad you're with us. hey, saw your prayer request. Like, I'm praying for you about this. It wasn't like kind of a form email. It was like specific, right? I
Mhm.
saw that you were praying for this specific things for your kids and for, um, and so reached out to me, like emailed me, connected with me. And just that act alone was like, I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. I felt like I'm not just somebody kind of sneaking in the door and, sneaking out. But what I know from what I do and what I help churches with is there's a lot of systems and software behind that to ensure that those kind of connections are happening. So that's one example. But I think figuring out, so how do we do that for people, on the stream, right? Is there a number that they can text if they need prayer or want to submit a prayer request that'll automatically send them a form that they could fill out that then enters into maybe a workflow in like our church management software that notifies certain staff members to send them a text or send them an email or whatever it might be. I think that's an example of some ways to get proactive and again meet people kind of where they're at.
I think you're right. And I think that takes the jump from just engagement to actual connection, because I think that's sometimes where a lot of people get lost. They get people engaged and they have a really good strategy to get people either in the door or online. And then it's like, okay, they're all here. Like, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And so I think that is a very intentional way to actually connect with people.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of years like as a worship pastor. I had a worship pastor friend of mine, awesome guy. One of the people I kind of looked up to in doing that. And he always said, love the people more than the music. And so I think that's one thing to remember too. So if you're in a communications role, really whatever, like love the people more than your social media strategy or more than, whatever it might be. And like, that doesn't mean those things don't matter. They really do. But like, keep the main thing, which is like, how do we connect with people so that ultimately, like we can see God do something in their life, to see Him bring healing and freedom and bring them into community, where they can continue to grow. So that's just something it's hard in ministry, I feel like, because you're in the weeds, and sometimes it's just helpful to lift your head and to remember that's what this is all about. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. It can be hard to lose that perspective, especially when you see your to-do list every day of all the things you have to get done, and we just have to get to Sunday and we have to get through the service and whatever. But you're right. It is all about the people, and to remember why we're doing it is a huge piece of it. So in terms of just like how to implement some of these things, I feel like maybe some of the church communicators out there just get very overwhelmed because they're like, okay, I have to learn a bunch of new software. I have to download a bunch of new tools. I have to pay for 6 new subscriptions. What can they do to better utilize existing things that they have in place, existing systems or digital tools that they already have access to better reach their community?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think just in general, whatever platform that you're on, and there's a lot of awesome tools. Like that's one thing in the last 10, 15 years, like technology in the church has really grown, and it's continuing to. I think there's some really cool stuff that's happening. I think if at all possible, for the platform that you're on, to do as much as you can under one roof, is the way to go. So if that means, because I agree, like I work with churches all the time. We use this place for online giving, and this for our church management software. We have this text service, this call service, this for forums, and it's like it's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah.
And the power in having all of that under one roof is that now that information and that all that communication, like it's all working together in one ecosystem. So to be able to see, even just to look at somebody's engagement, like one of the things that we always struggled with was, hey, we haven't seen this person in 3, 4, 5 weeks. Like, does anyone know? Have they been engaged? And so to be able to look at your software and say, oh yeah, we saw that like they gave, or they attended this class, or they checked their kids in here, whatever it might be. So my recommendation is not necessarily to go look for the latest and the greatest, but to say, okay, what are we using, and can it do everything under one roof? Now, if it can't, it may be time to evaluate if a change is needed. And there's a lot of different options for that. But to have something that integrates together, that talks to each other, that makes that information powerful. It also makes your life as a communications director, as church admin, whatever you're working in, a lot easier as well, because that lives in one place, and it kind of talks to all the information shared and all that stuff. So I think looking to see if you can do that under one roof is really helpful. And again, the technology continues to grow and progress, and so I think that the tools are just going to get better and better.
Definitely, I agree. And you mentioned earlier about receiving the personalized email about your prayer requests, and I feel like some people might be like, okay, well, that sounds great, but there's no way that our church can do that. Maybe it's like a one-man show, and you have one comms person doing everything. They're like, there's no way I can email every single person every time they have a prayer request. But like you're saying, there are systems that you can use. There are tools that you can put in place to really make your life way easier in terms of doing things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes what I think happens is, and this might be happening right now, right? Somebody's listening to this, or you've been to a church in your area that just is just killing it when it comes to communications and all this stuff. And you're like, I can't do that.
Right.
And you're right. You're right. You can't, because they probably have 4 staff members who just work on their weekly email.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
yeah,
I mean?
Right.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So what I would do is step back and just say, but what can I do? What can we do? Because I don't necessarily believe it's true that you can't do. I was going to say you can't do nothing. I don't know if that's the right grammar to use.
Yeah.
But I think people understand. I think that there is something to do. And then as far as the conversation about the tools, I would say if you're using the right tools, then there are features and functions that make it so that it's not resting on your shoulders, so that you don't have to go in and look who submitted a prayer request and then get their email, copy and paste. Now I type an email. Now I send it. Now, by the way, I'm going to get a response and have another conversation and multiply that by 20. That's a lot. That's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But to have something where actually they fill out that form and it triggered an automated workflow that gave me a to-do reminder, and I copied and pasted a rough template that then I was able to personalize and make really actually make it pretty warm for that person, and then hit send. That's a different process. And so I would say the tools are out there. Don't fall into the trap of we have to be exactly insert whatever church you might be or ministry you might be looking up to. And instead, just know that you can take small steps. And even if it's one thing, do that one thing and have that be a part of your rhythm and routine. And in 6 months' time, maybe add one more thing. And just know that I think you'll see a lot of fruit from that.
Definitely. Yeah. You can take it step by step, day by day, and really, perfect something before you move on to adding 6 other things. I think that's great advice. Do you have anything else that you would want the church communicator out there to know, or maybe a piece of advice or just encouragement for them in this season of ministry?
Yes. I think a couple things. One, just know that there is a community of people who have kind of walked through the busyness, the difficulty, the struggle of the last couple of years, and know that I know that there's some on here who have stayed up really late and woken up really early and did that around another full-time job while navigating kids at, doing school from home or whatever your situation might be. So I just hear from me that what you do really matters. I think, again, sometimes we think of communications and we think of information dissemination, right? It's how do I tell people what time small group starts? Obviously that's important, right? Put the start time on the graphic. We need that. Absolutely. But just know that what you're doing is so much more than that. And I think it's helpful to understand that lives are changed as people are connected with, they're engaged, and they actually are at, whether it's an event or a part of a small group or a class or a service. And the way that people hear about that, know about that, the way that they're invited into that, is through the work that the many people watching this are doing. So just here for me, it matters. It's really important. I think that as you continue to look at your tools, look at, the software you're using to do this stuff, again, try and use that the best that you can. Try and use that in a way that, again, it's not going to overwhelm you, but it's going to add more freedom and margin and capacity on your plate. And then if the time comes, like look for something that will do that. Look for something that you can utilize so that, your tools and your software are working for you rather than you trying to work against them. And I think that'd be the encouragement that I would leave to the group watching this for sure.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. If anyone is interested in connecting with you or learning more about Kindrid or the resources that you guys have available, what would be a good way for them to take that next step?
Yeah, absolutely. Kindrid.com is our website. I just had to type that in, by the way, to make sure.
just to check.
Go to our own website. Yeah. So I was
totally understandable. Sure. Yeah.
And that's kindrid.com. And so you can go to the website. Honestly, you can email me directly as well. It's just Scott, SCOTT, Holthaus, HOLTHAUS at ministrybrands.com. And so if there's any way that I can help, I can serve, just in anything I can do. I really do have a heart for ministry leaders, pastors, churches, and I want to see them strengthened and equipped. So you can go to our website, you can email me directly, and we'd love to help and serve, any way that we can.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. This has been so helpful and so just refreshing and encouraging. And I am so excited to have you guys with us. And we will be sure to include that link along with your email down below so that people can connect with you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. Appreciate it.